Welcome to the URI pre-departure session on exploring culture and culture shock. What is culture? As you study abroad, learning about the host culture is going to be an important part of your acclimation process. Culture is the sum of what a particular group of people has created together, share, and transmit. It refers to values, beliefs, attitudes, preferences, customs, learning styles, and communication styles. It includes history and historical interpretations, achievements or accomplishments, technology, the arts, literature, and more. You probably have a preconceived notion or stereotypes about what the culture of your host country will be like. What you will probably find is that some of your biases are correct. Additionally, some might be very incorrect. There are certain things that are obvious and evident just by watching and observing a culture. There are some things that you might learn about as you begin to participate in a culture. There are some areas of culture that you may not actually realize until you've lived in a culture for a certain length of time. Let's take a look at the iceberg model to better understand and explore culture. The iceberg that we're looking at now is one way of looking at an overall culture. Let's assume the culture of your soon-to-be host country. Things that are easily seen just by observing are perhaps gestures, how people eat, their rituals in terms of religion, food, holiday customs, how they dress, various facial expressions that they might make in certain situations, and style of music or entertainment. And, of course, one of the things that's most relevant to study abroad students is the type of teaching style they encounter, which might be very different from the American style of teaching and learning to which they are accustomed. There are some other cultural expressions that might be what we would consider below the surface and hidden aspects that you actually have to live or experience in order to learn about a culture. Perhaps if you're in an internship, you might observe the cultural work ethic, the importance or relaxed attitudes toward timeliness. Is leadership and individual success important, or is there more importance placed on the success of the larger group or organization? Is there a difference in the style of dress that people wear at the office and at school? You may also notice unique or different intricacies of friendship. You may learn about the host culture's views on politics or nuances related to family values and religious beliefs. So what is culture shock? Culture shock is a sense of confusion or disorientation when encountered with a culture other than the one that you are used to. It can be accompanied by anxiety and uncertainty. While there are lots of ways that students can prepare to be ready for a new culture, and certainly we recommend reading guidebooks and learning about the host culture through coursework, through language readiness, research, watching movies, reading the news, and similar activities, ultimately, there is a level of preparation that just can't happen until you arrive in country. In general, almost all students do experience some level of culture shock, and this is totally normal. It is really important to remember that when you experience culture shock, it is a completely normal reaction. Some signs of culture shock could be homesickness and lack of energy. Perhaps you're offered the opportunity to get involved in different excursions, or maybe some of your new friends and acquaintances are going out to explore the new city that you have just arrived in, and you decline because you are tired or you want to hang out by yourself. Perhaps you feel that you would prefer to spend your time calling friends and family back home. This is an example of isolation. Another way culture shock may manifest itself is by causing you to stereotype the host culture. Seeking isolation from the host culture, only wanting to hang out with your American friends, could be, for some students, a sign of culture shock. Using a significant amount of your free time or staying up at all hours communicating with people back home would also be an indication of culture shock. Instant communication has gotten easier and easier over the years for students to communicate with home, whether it be via iMessage, FaceTime, or Zoom. It's great to keep in touch with family and friends, but we do caution students with doing that too much because it can really keep you from immersing yourself and hinder assimilating into the host culture, which is likely one of the reasons that you've selected to go abroad in the first place. Some of the ways that students can strategize to avoid or counteract culture shock is to set realistic and attainable goals prior to departure. Is it a goal to learn a new language or achieve a certain language level proficiency? Is it a goal to take coursework that will enhance your curriculum back home or obtain an internship experience? Is it your goal to travel and immerse yourself in new cultures and meet new people? It is important to recognize prior to departing for your host country that you will likely experience some sort of culture shock when you arrive and possibly throughout your experience. How someone experiences culture shock can vary for each individual student, and so your experience with it could be very different from a friend who is going through the same study abroad program. Just remember, it is helpful to have a sense of humor and to laugh at yourself. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to say the wrong things or make the wrong gestures or perhaps take the wrong subway. Just accept that you will make mistakes, things will be different from your preset expectations, and that's okay. Try to be understanding of the host culture and the other students in your group if you are traveling with other students from around the US or from around the world. Put yourself in the shoes of an international student arriving at URI for the first time. Think back to when you were a freshman or transfer student on campus. You arrived on campus perhaps knowing very few people, and you had to adjust. You also arrived hopefully with an expectation that those around you would be understanding of you and everything that makes you unique. Act accordingly while abroad. We encourage you to experience the host pop culture, such as movies, television shows, political topics, and news on TV or online. Visit the cultural and historic sites. Interact with the host culture if you have that opportunity through community service or clubs at your host university if they offer them. Learn about what the local people like and dislike. You may find that there are certain topics in your host culture that are very popular for discussion and others that are more taboo, so proceed carefully. Try the local food. Try to see the local point of view and the reason behind it. You may not agree with everything about the host culture or think it's better than your way of doing things, but either way, the experience and encounters are important learning lessons and can contribute to the development of your cross-cultural skills. Let's think again about your arrival at URI as a freshman or transfer student. You probably had some preconceived notions about what college life would be like. Have all of those preconceived notions proven true? Now think about your upcoming experience abroad. Do you have any ideas or assumptions about how you will assimilate into a new culture? Let's look at the W-curve model to better understand culture shock. As we look at this, think not only about your first semester or year at college, but also about your upcoming time abroad. The W-curve encourages us to look at an individual's psychological adjustment as they enter into a new culture, adjust, and then return to their previous culture. Many times when students arrive at their host country, everything is new and exciting. They may be participating in an orientation, seeing sights, and meeting new people. Everything is amazing. This is considered the honeymoon stage. Many times, if students stay in their host culture long enough, they enter a phase known as culture shock. Culture shock does not necessarily occur because of lack of preparedness, but rather culture shock is part of the adjustment process. You are realizing that there are different ways of doing things and perhaps grappling with the fact that your way of doing something or learning about something or your customs might be different from other cultures, and just because they're different doesn't mean that they're wrong or right. It's just different and you're learning to assimilate into that new culture. Sometimes this process can cause some frustration or a sense of, what did I get myself into? Or, why do they do things this way? The American way is better. Sometimes students get a little defensive of the American culture. Eventually, if students allow themselves to learn from the host culture, they start to assimilate. They go through what is called a recovery or adjustment phase. Most students begin to be more flexible and adaptable to learning about the new culture and become more willing to immerse themselves further. They adjust and they learn to see the positives and the negatives of both the American and the host cultures. Eventually, there comes a time in which students begin to mentally prepare for their return to their home culture. Sometimes students get a little bit sad about the fact that they're leaving, but also super excited to go home and see family and friends. They arrive home and they enter a honeymoon phase all over again. They get together with friends and family and are so excited to share all of their experiences. At this point, culture shock sometimes hits again, known as reverse culture shock, and it's really surprising to students. Students sometimes have a really hard time understanding how they could experience culture shock in their own culture. While they're excited to be home, no one else quite understands what they've experienced or how they've changed. It can also be discomforting to realize that life went on without you. Sometimes friends and family might get sick of hearing their study abroad stories over and over again. Sometimes they reminisce about how they miss the way things were done overseas, or they may find acclimating back to the academic structure at URI to be a challenge if it differed from the teaching and learning style overseas. Strategies for combating reverse culture shock include connecting with other students who've returned from overseas and sharing their experience with reverse culture shock. Students are often surprised that they are not the only one to feel the way that they do. Students also find that getting involved with international students at URI who are experiencing their own version of study abroad can be exciting, rewarding, and helpful as well. There are also ways for returning study abroad students to stay connected to the Office of International Education and to share their experiences as part of International Education Week, the Study Abroad Fair, or as a URI Global Ambassador. Our office also has resources for students who are looking for ways to go global again, either during their URI experience or post-graduation. It is important to reiterate that all people experience culture shock and reverse culture shock differently to varying degrees. So although the W curve can help us visualize what most travelers experience, what is most important is to recognize the signs and use some of the tips that we've discussed for managing culture shock in your situation. Thank you for viewing this pre-departure orientation module. We hope that you have found it helpful. If you have not done so already, please remember to review the remaining pre-departure orientation modules in the pre-departure section of our YouTube account as they pertain to your specific program. As always, remember to contact us with any questions or concerns that you may have.